So as Sue has welcomed us, I don't think you'll need to hear any more, but that's our names. And a little bit more about CuddleCot. I think it's quite important for people to understand why it's suggested that you should cool a baby to begin with. And a lot of people don't always understand why you would necessarily do that. So with cooling a baby, actually keeping a baby cool enables families to be able to spend time with their baby. They can then have that opportunity to create memories, and sometimes families aren't going to do that immediately. So having that time with them makes them sometimes realize that these are memories that they want to make. The things like concepts of memory boxes and things can feel a bit overwhelming at first, or it can feel a bit alien, and then sometimes that time makes them feel a bit differently, and then it can facilitate those memories. And sometimes they might wait until family members have arrived, or they might need to travel as well. So it now gives families more of a choice that if somebody is coming to see them, that they can wait and that the baby can remain with them if they want to. It also slows down the process of changes to appearance, which is decomposition. And so the baby won't look as significantly changed as if they weren't cooled. So CuddleCot is kind of more than just the device. We're very much a brand as well as a device. So I'll talk through a bit more about the device in a minute. But the actual kind of brand of us being CuddleCot is being able to make sure that, as well as providing the CuddleCot system, we also provide the things in the network of the things that are needed for families. So as Claire mentioned earlier, support for families is so important, and equally for health professionals. So one of the things that we've now got on our CuddleCot website is something called Grief Chat. So Grief Chat is a free resource. It is trained therapists who specialise in grief, and that's available to any health professionals, students, and the families. 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. UK time, Monday to Friday, so they can access that at any point. If they want to just talk to someone, and obviously that's someone that's impartial, it's confidential, that doesn't come through. It's on our website, but it doesn't come through to us as a team. It's completely through a therapist. So sometimes families need to talk to someone, they don't know who to talk to, and for some people, like Claire said, don't want to pick up a phone. We've kind of become that society equally where we are more kind of on our phones and typing and texting and emailing, and people find comfort in that. But equally, it can be switched over to a phone conversation if somebody needs that. And sometimes as a health professional, it's kind of, sometimes you might just want that. You might want to just have a conversation with someone. And sometimes it's just to seek that reassurance you've done the right thing. We've also got other resources on our website. So we've got training materials, which can then support you as a health professional to feel more confident, especially those that are students. And it is an area that is very heavily under educated in. It's unfortunately doesn't become a priority. And it seems to not really be changing. It's not really changed for a number of years in terms of it being readily available in a lot of universities, and then the same even in mandatory training. It's often the first thing to be cut off mandatory training if anything gets kind of cut off from that, because it becomes one of those things that just isn't a priority. But equally, it means that because you tend to not have as much exposure, because you don't have as much education, because you don't always have as much exposure in practice, then it means that your skill sets are often feel like you've not quite got them, but you need that exposure to get them. So it's kind of something that you have to allow yourself to become exposed to before you become confident. But equally, exposures through training, meeting a bereavement team, if you're a student, have spoke days and opportunities to see what it's like in different parts of the country, and different hospitals will do different things. So even if you think you're going to qualify and go into the hospital that you work in currently, still go and see another hospital and how they do it, because when you're further down the line from being qualified, there might be things that you can bring in or suggestions you can make to the team that you have. And you just never know what you might learn from somewhere else. We have other resources, so quick videos that you can access, just kind of Q&A things, troubleshooting information. Sometimes it is just down to kind of the person using a device, for example, and sometimes it's just that you've not had time to read the instructions and you just need a bit of help, and we have information for that. As well as general support, we also have servicing. We've got servicing based within the UK and the US, that the CuddleCots can come from all over the world to both those points. So it means that if the CuddleCot needs service, we are specialists at it. We've made it. So it just means that we can properly make sure the device is working. We can replace components. We can check that the health of it is okay. We've had the CuddleCots run for years and years and years without needing much else than a service. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can visit our website. But equally, if you just want to ask about it, we can help you with those questions. And it is also the most popular cooling product worldwide. So not even just in the UK. There's over 2,000 in the UK and the US, each country alone, as well as scattered all around the world. And there's quite a few reasons for that, and I'll kind of go into more of why the CuddleCot is a bit different than some of the devices shortly. What I'm going to do is ask Steve to kind of introduce a bit more of how the CuddleCot came about and why it was made, if that would be all right, Steve.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Steph. The CuddleCot came out, as Sue mentioned, I'm one half of the team. Myself and my colleague Simon, we were serving police officers, and we'd had a little bit of experience dealing with families around stillbirth. And once we then started working on a much, much larger system, which was designed for cooling bariatric patients, families came to us and said, had we thought about doing something for babies, so they could actually spend that time with baby? And the truth is we hadn't, but we got our heads together, and we came up with the CuddleCot, basically. It's obviously a nice, small, portable device, which is obviously what we wanted. We wanted something which could be portable, and which was very, very quiet. And yes, I've got a background, as Sue mentioned. CBRN, by the way, is chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological. It's basically what fire service and nuclear energy. But so I work in several facilities and markets, and one of them including is I do a lot of work with mortuary managers. And I was at a conference with them only a couple of weeks ago. And it was amazing how many people had actually heard of the CuddleCot, heard of the great work, obviously, that happens on the ward, and were aware that obviously the baby doesn't need to go down to the mortuary, which is far, far nicer for the family, just to be able to have that time with baby, which is what obviously Claire and Steph and everybody out there, it's what everybody agrees with. It is extremely important that the family get that choice. I'm particularly lucky. One of the things I do, I go over to the US quite a lot. In fact, I go on Friday, and I meet families out there, and I go to charity events and fundraising events. And the word that the families use, that have used these CuddleCots for their baby, is joy. How much joy they got out of actually sharing that baby with the rest of the family, even friends, neighbors. I've met so many families who have told me that, and met these out families, that just how large they can be and how much joy they got about sharing the experience of their baby. And what you guys obviously do is just superb. And I think I would be safe in the knowledge saying that the UK is the world leaders in care for the baby and after death. And the United States have an awful long way to go. But getting there, we're changing cultures, we're changing the difference. But no, it is, as Steph said, it's an extremely important tool, and it's there. And please, if anybody has any questions, just come and talk to us. We're not a huge company. We're only based in Gloucestershire. So we're happy to help anybody where we can.
So the CuddleCot itself is quite different to some other devices because it isn't a system that the baby gets placed into. However, instead, it's a system that works with whatever you want to place the baby into. So the actual CuddleCot itself is the blue device that for those that are watching on the screen are able to see. And then it uses water that then goes through a hose and into a pad. So the pad is then compatible with any cot, any Moses basket. It can be placed in bed with the parents. It can be held in the parents' arms. So it means that it's adaptable to wherever they want their baby to be. So for some families, they don't want to let go of the baby, they want to hold them. And they can do that without feeling cold themselves, and the baby can be wrapped suitably to do that. And it means it can also be adapted for different gestations and size of babies. So for some smaller babies, being in other devices means that they look really tiny in that device, whereas you can get a small Moses basket and use a smaller pad and then place the baby in there instead. It can be taken home quite easily because everything for a CuddleCot fits in one storage case that has a handle, so it can be carried quite easily and everything can be fitted in there. Families have often sometimes either chosen to use their own Moses basket or cot at home, or they've even brought their own into hospital because it's the only chance they're going to get to use it, so they want to use their own. So it just gives a bit more choice. It cannot physically reach a freezing temperature. It's limited, so that cannot happen. So it means that even if the pad is directly on the baby's skin, it cannot cause any additional damage to the baby's skin. And it's been made specifically for the purpose that we're using it for. A lot of other devices have been adapted based on things like refrigeration, which realistically is not made for babies and babies' skin, and it's just an adaptation to use it for a baby, but it doesn't necessarily make it safe on skin and things like that. And sometimes it takes additional kind of inputs to prevent damage happening to a baby. So it's something that's been kind of quite seriously considered with the CuddleCot, is that we're not here to make this any worse. We can't make it better, but we can kind of smooth out the process so that we're not making any additional barriers be added in the way, but we can add things in to make this process smoother. There's a couple of things that people sometimes do, and one of those is adding ice packs and cold blocks. And it's one of the things where I'm not going to compare lots of other devices, but sometimes people use these kinds of things, and sometimes they might see that this is a better option. There are some times where people aren't familiar with the CuddleCot, don't know fully how to use it. And because of a lack of training, sometimes people just aren't familiar with it, so jump to something that they know. And people know ice packs, it's very familiar. They use them in the picnics, they use them in the freezer. But equally, it's not necessarily something I would ever recommend as a midwife or in my role at CuddleCot. So obviously an ice pack can get to -18 degrees, which then could freeze onto the baby's skin. And as I said before, we're not here to cause more damage. It's not regulated or temperature controlled, so it will begin to warm up. Warming up and meeting the warm air in the around the cold pack or whatever it is will form condensation that can make the baby feel very wet and soggy, which sometimes can be quite distressing for the family, because if there's any like bits of blood or anything, it can become quite evident and spread across their clothes, which for families can be quite alarming. You don't always know at what point you need to switch it out, and then obviously the baby will begin to warm up. And it's obviously something that's never been designed for a baby, it's been designed for food. So the use of ice packs is something that I would heavily suggest you do not use, or even question why it's being used. So with the CuddleCot itself, there's lots of options for families to be able to use it in many different ways, from using it with a Moses basket, using it with a cot, using it with whatever they have already. They can obviously keep it in the bed with them, so that the baby can be with them as well. And it just gives a bit more flexibility in the choices that they have. One of the things that we heavily say is a CuddleCot isn't for everybody, but it should always be a choice. And there are many hospitals that do have them, and sometimes they might only offer them if a family's going home, but often CuddleCots can give a bit more flexibility than what other devices can. And sometimes it's even important just to say these are the two options we have, and why you would recommend cooling, talking a family through it. You don't have to use words like because the baby will deteriorate or they'll look worse and things like that, because their baby's not a piece of fruit that's going to go off, but their baby will change. And that's okay to explain that. And we recommend cooling the baby because your baby will begin to change, and these processes can be slowed down a little bit more if we cool baby. Baby might be cold to touch, but we can wrap baby up and we can keep them warm and we can put a hat on them and all those things that families want to do to keep the baby warm, the instinctive nature of parenting, we encourage because it actually insulates everything to do with the CuddleCot. We're producing some more resources that are going to be on our website in the next couple of weeks, that show you how to wrap the baby really effectively as well. So you can make it really easy for families to just pick up the baby and not feel any cold, but be able to cuddle them as well. So hopefully that'll help more people. I've tried not to fill the slides significantly, so that people can ask questions if there's anything specific they do want to ask. And obviously myself and Steve, and I'm sure Claire, are happy to answer any questions, or even later if you do want to follow up with an email, you're more than welcome to.